Welcome to Navigating Technical Terrain, Scaling Digital for B2B Buying Groups. I'm Kelly DeLeon, Vice President of Marketing and Strategy at the MX Group, an integrated B2B marketing agency. Today, I'm joined by Kevin Coe, Senior Vice President of Digital and Partner at the MX Group. Kevin oversees MX's digital development practice and is instrumental in delivering digital and technology services to mid-size and enterprise B2B companies around the world. Under his guidance, every year we develop and implement hundreds of custom software applications and digital projects. We're also joined today by our guest speaker, Jessie Johnson, a principal analyst for Forrester focused on demand and account-based marketing. Jessie has more than 10 years of experience working with B2B organizations in the key areas of digital transformation, inbound marketing, audience segmentation, lead nurturing, customer engagement, social media, and creative optimization across digital marketing channels. We'll be looking today at how buying groups impact marketing teams and processes and technologies with a focus on what's really required to create the digital interactions that today's B2B buyers expect. Digital has always been part of our DNA at the MX Group, but the challenges of getting digital right for today's buyers amidst the complexity of B2B buying groups is a topic that really surged to the forefront in my mind for a couple of key reasons. First, we recently conducted some research into millennial B2B buyers. Not surprisingly, they have higher expectations of the digital buying experience, and they're also growing in influence within B2B buying groups, oftentimes being the primary decision maker. And then secondly, there's certainly been an increase in digital behaviors and expectations amidst the coronavirus pandemic. With remote work increasing, there's certainly a need to accelerate the transition of many sales practices and marketing practices for virtual environments. Now, of course, acknowledging these shifts and changes can be pretty easy, but it's a whole nother thing to really figure out how to operationalize and change and adapt these complex sales and marketing processes for this new digital expectation. So today, I'm really excited that we'll be digging into 7 key areas that marketers must address to scale their digital for B2B buying groups. Jessie's going to provide a framework for how marketers can think about resourcing for each of those areas. And then Kevin's going to come in and provide some real-world perspective on where marketers can get the most value from engaging partners. Now, we're recording this session, and of course, it will be available on demand afterwards. If you have a question, please go ahead and add it in the chat box, and we'll get back to you. And now, let's get started. Kevin and Jessie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kelly. We're excited to get into the topic today. So as you can see on the screen, we've got a mountain biker, which doesn't have anything to do with marketing almost. But as a technologist and an avid mountain biker, to me, there are parallels. Mountain bike technology, like marketing technology, has progressed so far that it enables us to achieve things and go places we never could before. But technology is an enabler when it's right for the job and a limiter when it's wrong for the job. If you don't have the right tools, you can't handle the terrain. So while this is a pretty cool retro vibe right here, I wouldn't want to try this on the trails. Thankfully though, technology has advanced both in mountain biking and in marketing technology. A modern mountain bike can give you the confidence to push your limits, to go places you never thought you could before. Just looking at this thing makes me feel invincible, like you could go anywhere and do anything. But the bike's half the story. The bike isn't going anywhere without a skilled rider, and the MarTech stack is really just an expensive email blaster without marketers who understand it. To get the most out of any technology, you have to know where you're going, pick the right tech to get there, and have the skills to execute. The bike makes it easier, but it doesn't do it for you. We're going to need the right bike and the right rider to tackle new terrain like B2B buying groups. The fact that we can even talk about marketing at scale to buying groups is a testament to the advancement of marketing technology. But we need a plan to get the most out of it. So today, I'm here with Jessie from SiriusDecisions. Her framework to evaluate both your technology and your team is great, and it'll help make the right technology and people decisions to handle the buying group terrain. Jessie?
Thanks, Kevin. And thank you, Kelly, for having me. So as we know, B2B purchases are largely made by groups of individuals. Some are researching solutions independently, but all are working together to make that decision. In fact, our research shows that 80% of purchases over $5,000 in annual revenue are made by teams of 3 or more people. So understanding buying group dynamics requires a solid foundation of digital capabilities. What functions or roles are required in marketing, sales, and product? What processes are needed and what should our KPIs be? What technologies are required to be successful? Connecting and enabling buying groups requires a solid digital foundation, considered use of all that technology, proper data structure, and multi-level processes that include strategic, tactical, operational, and measurement activities. So our roadmap, how do we get there to enable and scale for buying groups? And the first step is to identify what are those business requirements at the discipline and program level so we know how and where to focus our efforts with digital and what that means for resourcing. Next, we want to identify the technology and service categories offering capabilities to support those requirements. And then we decide to build or buy to balance strategic skills in-house with optimized resourcing and workflows for the work that's outsourced. Use these steps to build a digital capabilities roadmap for scaling in a buying group's world through the optimal skills, process, measurement, and technologies. Stumbling in execution is certainly costlier than working with a provider that specializes in the type of work that's required. Organizations that fail to thoroughly evaluate their internal capabilities to execute activities and manage functions are more than likely to stumble on that bike path.
That's great, Jessie. Thanks. Yeah, this breakdown really helps, I think, organizations to understand their readiness. I'd add to this that in order to do the breakdown, in order to execute this assessment, you'll need to understand buying groups, marketing technology well enough to know the requirements so you could recognize the gaps. So as we explore how the framework really works, you may feel comfortable assessing these things, or it may look pretty daunting. If it looks daunting, there are full stack partners like the MX Group that can help, even at the assessment and planning stage. So as you think about this, as you consider what it takes to get your organization to that right point, just think about the fact that you don't necessarily have to do it alone.
So our first must-do is to define the target market. And to get to our target market, we need to first work to narrow our focus on a specific set of accounts and buying centers that match the ideal customer profile. Always start with program objectives and business requirements, so we don't have any random acts of execution. So in this stage, our must-do is to define the ideal customer profile and use that to then prioritize key buyer roles, segments, and data strategy, and create demand maps to augment our understanding of the target market and buying groups within that target. From there, we have an understanding of our capabilities that will be required. We need to look across multiple systems for the presence and depth of functionality around what we need to define that target market. Within those business requirements, we need to leverage capabilities from CRM and SFA systems, marketing automation platforms, intent monitoring, profile data management, and predictive applications, among others. So as we think about what capabilities do we already have, and say we've identified a gap in the ability to define key buyer roles. Despite having the required technology capabilities, there's a gap in process. So we need to decide, do we build or buy that capability using the SiriusDecisions in-source versus outsource decision framework to evaluate where functions or activities should be managed and executed. So let's walk through that process. Consider the following circumstances to assess how expansion of activities or addition of a new provider will affect current processes and the team's ability to execute work and achieve results. Start with strategic importance. If it's a foundational element of demand management processes or introduces risk of siloed data, consider maybe keeping it in-house or working with a long-standing, trusted partner. And then there's risk. These are the activities with high sensitivity due to confidentiality or IP requirements. Skills determine if team members have the requisite knowledge, skill, and process competencies to effectively manage or execute these activities. And finally, relationships assess the existence of relationships with providers that can execute the work outlined in the project charter. So next, we want to evaluate the total cost associated with the planned work for both the insourced and outsourced scenarios, not just the required budget, but also the time required of resources to complete the tasks. And note that even when work is outsourced, internal resources are still required to manage these efforts. Other considerations: is budget available to fund the function or activities that the organization is considering outsourcing to that provider? Is it possible or beneficial to divert budget from other activities? And then determine whether the team members have time to execute this work, paying particular attention to whether staff can take on workload peaks around time-bound events, such as shows and product launches. And finally, determine whether the organization has purchased or has access to any technologies needed to complete those activities, and whether internal staff members have been sufficiently trained or can be trained on those technologies. And circumstance and cost are unique to your organization and buyers. A key thing to focus on in this stage is illuminating blind spots. What does a buying group look like? Where do its members hang out, and what do they talk about? So as we weigh all possibilities and take an honest look at the organization's circumstances and costs, this allows leaders to make fact-based sourcing decisions that increase productivity and meet objectives. And since this business requirement sets us up for how and where we monitor intent signals from known and unknown sources, we'll lean toward insourcing this work. Step number 2 in our 7 must-dos is enabling buying groups and detecting those that are active. We can do this by using first-party intent monitoring to de-anonymize accounts visiting our website, and third-party intent data to identify extrinsic signals that reflect which solution a target buying group is showing interest in. Underlying all our business requirements in this stage is the need to watch for intent activity signals that indicate a buying group should move from target to active demand, and to integrate those signals into the program and processes that follow. And this requires a campaign strategy to create awareness and build preference while integrating intent signals into acquisition processes. And along with technology, by this time, we should be focused on internal processes and workflows for program design and activation, ensuring content is properly tagged for the buying group with the ability to support personalization in multiple delivery mechanisms to engage and qualify demand. However, we've identified a gap in social media and event management related to brand objectives, which limits our visibility into the connections of buying signals to an account or the buying group for an opportunity. So we need to determine how to monitor for intent activity signals when the current tech stack and processes are creating some blind spots. So considering circumstance, utilizing intent technologies to listen for and respond to buying group signals is a strategic activity, something we want to be able to continue to do long term. And within the brand work, we need to use artificial intelligence to recognize and predict behavioral patterns that indicate when buying groups are ripe for outreach, and a roadmap that should reflect this. And from a cost perspective, we can automate many processes to drive efficiencies, but the creative and storytelling elements of branding are often best left to agency partners. To drive awareness, perception, and preference for the brand to progress, demand from target to active, the budget and time required to do this well certainly tip the scales toward outsourcing. In our next phase, we need to attract buying group members by using marketing and sales tactics that push messaging and offers in front of the right people in the right accounts, demonstrating intent at the right time. And within those programs designed to attract buying group members, we need to deliver things like target ads to active intent, personalized experiences to engage hand raisers, and the next best offer or interaction across the buying group. There are a lot of moving parts in this stage. And from a technology perspective, we must be able to connect signals captured at the individual level to other members of the buying group and leverage those signals and connections in program activation. For example, if multiple members of a buying group are engaged in an active opportunity and a new member of the group registers for a webinar, that's an important signal. And when a new member of the buying team is identified and validated, this buyer could be invited to a personalized microsite featuring content that the rest of their team has accessed or expressed interest in. So if execution work is outsourced, the ability to execute personalization strategies with buying group context should be a key part of tactic strategy and data management. And multiple systems in the stack have at least some depth of functionality to support those business requirements. Lead to account matching technology is critical here, and we have that. But what we don't have in-house is the ability to personalize at scale or predict and activate the content and tactics that will encourage prospects at all levels to engage with marketing efforts. This gap in personalized advertising impacts our ability to convert active demand to leads and leads to contacts as soon as possible in the demand process in order to associate them at the account level. Yet the work is strategically important because this is a foundational object for buying group aware systems and processes. But the ability to scale execution is a key factor in cost considerations. Kevin, what are your thoughts on program design?
Yeah, I think this is very on point with how you need to think about budget and time and technology. I guess I'd layer into that a little bit and say that it's also important to have the right approach in what you're doing within the executing the digital program strategy. Developing the content to attract more buying group members can be done the traditional way, and I use traditional kind of loosely in that personalizing the way you've talked about is hardly traditional. Many organizations are trying to push in that direction. But it can be more than just writing content for each persona and then hoping that they come to your site and consume it, even though that's personalized and direct and you're trying to appeal to each valuable member of the buying group. You can also have a different mindset and think to yourself that the best influencer that you have to bring in more buying group members is actually the buying group member that you already have. So that means developing content that prompts and arms one group member or multiple group members to evangelize to the other group members. And so once you kind of have that mindset, develop that content, it also means configuring your customer journey to present that information at the right time, and then using that technology to enable one member to send that information to another member. Doing it through your own systems gives you that opportunity to capture who they're sending it to, who else they're trying to engage in the organization. And so that whole mindset there is really about targeting the intersections between different personas so that you can kind of get that first persona to be tempted to be thinking about, yeah, if I really want this, if I'm starting to be sold on this, what is it that I have as an aha moment to say, you know what, I can go to Mary Manager and tell her this and this about this product, and that's going to get her on board, and I'll get some momentum towards where I want to go. So that whole process kind of allows you to sort of lily pad from one buying group member to another, and that can be one of your most powerful ways to lead through the process.
Absolutely. It really starts to blur the line between strategy and execution where we are now. For sure. Yeah. Next, we must connect de-anonymized traffic to known visitors and score demand units by aggregating behavioral signals to prioritize demand for outreach to multiple buying group members. To do this, the organization must listen to behavior scoring signals from buying group members to move the buying group from the active to the engaged demand stage when it shows initial engagement with those strategic marketing efforts. To support these business requirements, we need to be able to execute in a way that allows teleservices to connect information to better qualify and prioritize buying groups in the next stage. We need to be able to track campaigns and content at the solution of interest level to support solution level scoring within accounts. And we find that multiple systems can support the capabilities that we need. But we're focused here on capabilities that will aggregate scoring at the individual account, solution, and buying group level to understand true engagement. And perhaps that uncovers a gap in predictive scoring capabilities that leverage machine learning, historical opportunity data, and buying group lookalikes. So we need to determine whether to build or buy to fill that gap. Organizations must consider first the strategic importance of calculating scores at multiple levels within systems, including scoring for each solution within the product family. Even when execution work is outsourced, ensure input from the output of those demand programs and tactics into the scoring models. Resourcing must also account for these critical capabilities that drive progression from engaged to prioritized demand. To stand up a buying group scoring model, systems need a custom object or customized version of an existing standard object to move the scores of buying group members to the opportunity. Configurations best done in-house or by specialized agency and technology service providers. And Kevin, I understand you've done some work there. What is your experience with the prioritization of buying groups and associating some of those members on the back end?
Yeah, thanks, Jessie. You're right. That's definitely kind of a key area of work because while we'd like systems to support buying groups and they have capabilities that play in that realm, in general, the MarTech stack is challenged by thinking about the idea of buying groups in the process. So you're spot on with this really key point about the buying group object being central. And you've kind of addressed that as you move into systematizing. In the way that you're thinking or talking about developing the buying group scoring model and having that be a key strategic piece that you insource, I can agree with that as well. The thing I'd layer into that is that to build an effective buying group scoring model, you do need that custom object. To build that custom object, you have to understand a lot about what is going to happen in your technology as a result. And that can actually affect how you think about or build your scoring model itself. Are you doing something that's machine learning driven? Are you doing something that is rules based? How are those rules going to interact? Because once you build a custom object inside of a system to handle that scoring model, you're going to find frequently that it's going to be capable of certain things in the technology and not other things. Perhaps you can make the custom object, but you can't apply scoring triggers from certain custom fields on contacts, or some other limitation in that process. You also kind of need to consider the ripple effect, which is that you make those custom objects, maybe your scoring model works well, reporting turns into a challenge because everything that's pre-built in the system is sort of pointed in that direction. Or maybe that daisy chains into turnkey integrations. You made the custom object in the most appropriate system. You need that to play through from your marketing automation to your CRM, but the turnkey integration doesn't handle what you've built from a custom perspective. So all of these technology concerns are really central to figuring out how do you handle that buying group object? Where do you build it? What's it capable of? And all of those concerns can then play backwards through your scoring model development. So even though as our clients are the experts on their products, their markets, their selling cycle, so that a lot of that is strategic and core internally, what I would recommend is to kind of make this portion of it a blend of insource and outsource and engage with a partner who understands both what you're trying to do with the scoring model and what's going to happen in the technology very early in that conversation and collaborate through that scoring model development, because you don't want to have to retool it once you start thinking about systematizing and realize all the things that you can't do.
That's a great point too, Kevin. Collaboration really is the key there. Just as the buying group is collaborating to make that purchase decision, being able to collaborate with our partners to make sure that we can support that buying group is another, certainly an area of focus.
Definitely.
All right, and this brings us into our fifth must-do. So at this stage, we have opportunities that are qualified and delivered to sales with at least one appointment with a buying group member. So we now need to connect these initial human interactions with the non-human interactions that preceded them. And at this point, teleservices is speaking to and connecting all the buying signals from the buying group to prioritize for movement into the qualified demand stage. And to support these business requirements, we need to be able to connect buying group behaviors and activity history to those calls to prioritize, streamline, and optimize outreach activities. And we could look at multiple systems for the capabilities needed to do this work. In the audit step, ensure systems allow teleservices to see all connections and prioritize opportunities that are most ready for calling efforts to streamline the team's effectiveness. And notice here the same capabilities are supporting multiple business requirements, but from a process perspective, there's a gap in how those capabilities are used to support outreach activities to identify potential opportunities. Do we insource or outsource to fill this process gap? From a strategic perspective, supplying teleservices teams with intent data and scoring information at the individual, account, solution, and opportunity level unlocks a lot of their capabilities used for program design and activation, as well as demand management. And once the strategy is set and the data is sourced, it's a matter of scaling BDR resources to support and enable demand management processes. And this is work that can't wait. So we'll lean toward outsourcing many of those outreach activities. And next, we want to move demand from qualified to pipe. Here, organizations must apply marketing and sales tactics to drive buying group engagement and accelerate deals through the pipeline. We gain a better understanding of demand progression by viewing how multiple individuals within an account are sending buying signals to indicate engagement or readiness. The ability to qualify deals instead of individual leads starts with an understanding of buying group relationships, their needs, and solution alignment through acceleration programs. So from a capabilities perspective, we need to be able to view buying signals by solution to acknowledge that multiple individuals within an account are interested in a specific solution. And then we need to provide sales with a complete view of that opportunity. And again, we can look at multiple systems to help meet those needs. We need a complete picture of buying group members, their connection to the account, and their solution of interest to provide better qualified opportunities to sales. But that's a gap in the organization's current capabilities. Understanding buying group relationships is critical to accelerating deals to pipeline. So with this in mind, as we think about this question, do we build or buy for those capabilities? This is certainly an investment that creates lift across all other touch points from qualification to close. So as we think about how best to handle this particular must-do, with the strategic importance as well as risk, if it's not done well, we're tipping the scales toward insourcing some of this work or outsourcing this work to a strategic partner that has a great familiarity with the business itself, as well as those buyers that you're trying to reach and engage. So it's really a capacity, a capability, and a skill set to consider for a long-term investment. And as we think about bringing things to close, we don't want to stop with just 6 must-dos. So the next stage is aligning the solution to buying group needs to address buyer information requirements as opportunities move from pipeline to closed won. So we have to have processes in place to automatically route or create the best fit customer onboarding experience of buying group members as well as end users of the solution. And then also suppress them from in-market messaging targeting buying stages if that hasn't already been done. So as we look at the technology stack, we first need to identify those capabilities and categories that allow continued connection of digital to human touchpoints from pipe to close in the customer lifecycle. But we've identified a gap at the handoff point and a key decision to make that impacts the customer's initial experience with the offering, which is pretty important as a touch point in the customer lifecycle and should already be part of resource planning when it comes to cost. The impact of this handoff on customer experience and the internal alignment required to deliver the offering tilts the scales toward insourcing this work. Kevin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, good point. There's a lot of this, obviously, that happens internal to the sales organization within these points. The challenge for marketers has always been getting them to close the loop and tell us what actually worked so that we can align our marketing efforts. But I'd layer something as well onto the handoff to customer success, which is that while that's definitely an internal focus, right? A client of ours is deeply committed to and understanding whether they're getting customer success out of it. Marketers have a keen interest in customer success as well because, you know, referrals, raving fans, testimonials, wallet share, all these things are key to driving revenue, and you need a happy customer in order to achieve any of that. So there's the buyer's journey, but there's also the customer's journey. How are they proceeding in the arc through their experience with you as a company? And we all know that eventually that customer journey leads back to the buyer's journey. When are they repurchasing? What does their cycle look like? So marketers have a keen interest in that process as well. And just like there's a buying group during the initial selection, there's also a customer users group. And that same buying group may get pulled into play again once the cycle restarts. So the same kinds of digital contact points and orchestration of a team of people around customer success happened during the marketing process. So the entire buying group, not just the after purchase users, should really be considered as part of customer success. And the same systems that got you here, that got someone to purchase and move into a customer success cycle, can also be leveraged to help get you here again. And so as a marketer, I think it's important to be a stakeholder in customer success. So you can personalize communication with your customer and manage the longer arc of their customer experience. So I guess the key point on that to me is don't let personalization and group management stop at close. Customer success needs just as much there. You don't want to just taper off with like one satisfaction survey and some newsletters and generic promotions while letting the customer success team handle everything from there. Map your customer journey, keep marketing in a buyer-centric way. Think about how you can utilize all of that great thinking and systemization that you've done in the buying process to get them back around to the same point.
Absolutely, and continue that conversation from the buying cycle into the customer life cycle as though we're not meeting for the first time.
Yeah.
Right. So the 3 phases of our roadmap don't work in isolation. We need to use business requirements, technology capabilities, and in-source outsource weighting to help drive that roadmap. And there's no one-size-fits-all approach to scaling digital in a buying group world. It depends on your buyers and how they progress through their unique and connected journeys. But start with that data layer. Where do buying signals live? How are they used? And are there unintentional silos or lags affecting program execution or demand processes? Investigate the use of current systems and processes, and update as appropriate to connect individuals with accounts, solutions, and opportunities. This is an opportunity for marketers to rethink the balance of planning and execution and creative work, and even underlying processes with the new tools and the tech stack to support bringing some of these activities in-house, or going deeper with your trusted partners that are already part of your go-to-market strategy. Invest in technologies to assist with intent monitoring, AI applications, display ads, and content targeting, as well as lead to account matching, sales enablement, and teleservices. We then need to harmonize with service providers to ensure budget is put toward the most impactful services and strategic execution work for your business, and that back-end processes or automated workflows are connected to agency systems to avoid creating any unintended audience or channel silos. And a lack of a documented data privacy and compliance process and governance model or approach would certainly be time for a pause or could even be a showstopper. So thinking about these three key buckets in our roadmap for enabling and scaling digital in a buying group world, Kevin, where should organizations think about getting started?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic in this process, because we need to get from kind of these ideal considerations. What's strategic? What should you insource in this process? What should you outsource? To a practical plan that gets you moving right away. There's we've covered a lot of ground here, and there are a lot of dimensions to trying to get the entire tech stack and your own strategic planning to kind of orchestrate in a way that pays all of this off. So if you want to get moving quickly in the process, I think you have to think in that balance in terms of putting emphasis on what you've built so far, what you're already good at doing. That's definitely part of your model already. But as you've highlighted, some pieces you want to think about internalizing. The question is, from my point of view, is when. There's always a priority to get things done now. You're always needing to produce in each given year. And so how do you create an arc that gets you towards that internalization, but moves the ball forward quickly? So there's another slide that we've got here that digs a little bit into that, just kind of making a point that practical beats ideal for now. The practical reality of team capabilities is often what I see pulled ahead of what the ideal strategy is for what's core and how you pull things in. And that is twice as true when the initiative involves adopting a new marketing paradigm, because all of this is happening within the context of doing that work against buying groups, in technology changes, with custom objects in a way that's going to feel unfamiliar to many teams out there. And so obviously outsource has an advantage in that they're out there doing this kind of work repeatedly for multiple clients, not just learning the paradigm once. And so as you think about that practical side, what are you already good at feeding into it? That may lead you down the outsource side, and just be sure to think about whether you're outsourcing to execute, meaning that's your permanent strategy. This is where we want this to be done. Or are you outsourcing to learn? Are you outsourcing to insource and get alignment with all the things, Jessie, that you were just going through? I'd say the second thing is really about full stack coordination, which is that there's a challenge in whether you insource, outsource, choose a blend, use one vendor, multiple vendors with what you outsource. There's a challenge in making sure that you don't end up siloed into each one of those outsources in a way that doesn't create good orchestration across the entire process. So, MX is kind of a broad capabilities place, and so we've worked across the entire umbrella of all of these things. But we've also plugged in as a vendor within a team of vendors, and we've seen what happens when you're kind of getting output, content that operates more like a standalone piece than it operates like something that orchestrates a buying group towards making a decision. And then you're trying to plug that into a journey and see where you're going with it. So I guess I would say just make sure whatever your strategy is, however many players you bring to the table, don't just assume that you can hand out those roles and pieces to each one of the players and say, great, go do your thing, and then it'll all come back and it'll fit together. The pieces need to fit together in a tighter way than that. And I guess the final point would be just get started. I know you're probably looking at this framework thinking, wow, this looks like a big project all by itself. Like, how am I even going to get through that? Because it turns out we've got a day job before we had to assess a new paradigm. But like the old saying goes, there's never a good time to have a baby. At some point, you just have to look at it and say, we have to move forward with this or get left behind. And unlike having a baby, in this case, you can kind of phase that out. You can carve it into smaller pieces. You can look at specific capabilities within the process, even if you're not going to cover the whole arc right away. Or you can pilot a segment of your market, a product line, and say, let's get that full stack set of capabilities within that space. So I would say engage in some planning about how to take this on, and think about bringing in a partner who can recommend what your piloting strategy should be like in order to be able to, have progress but not be trying to boil the ocean. Recognize that it's a momentum building process. There's just a lot of stages to this. So you're not going to have one big project and just say, okay, we're going to do that in the first 2 quarters of this year and then we'll be done. What you're going to do is evolve that strategy over time. You're going to do kind of a iterative and incremental deployment of it. You may be touching all the points in an unsophisticated way at first and then gaining depth, or you may focus on a core capability. You just need a strategy for how to move through it and not get intimidated by the larger sweep of the whole thing. So however you plan it, whatever you're going to do, just recognize you need to get started. And so as you align the people, the processes, and the technology, it'll be like getting the rider and the bike both dialed in. It's that kind of combination we talked about in the beginning, where the people and the technology really work together to get you places, and you'll be able to hit new heights, take on paths you didn't really think that you could handle before, coordinating that buying group in ways that might have felt laborious and time intensive to try and get any kind of coordination. But with automation, you can get there. And if you commit to that strategic direction and you run it as a continuous process, then you can carve it up and get it done. Yeah, so with that in mind, Jessie, thank you so much for spending time with us today, for walking us through your framework. I think having any kind of a model like that is going to do wonders for anybody to be able to get moving and know how to approach it. It's been great.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin and Jessie. That was some really great insight that you shared and some very important must-dos for us marketers. If today's webinar really interested you and you want to go deeper into this topic, we have a SiriusDecisions research brief that you can download. It's called The 7 Must-Dos, How Buying Groups Change Everything. And it really digs into the key role for marketing at each stage of the funnel and how marketing must adapt to accommodate these buying groups. So you can go to the URL on your screen to download it today. And if you want to stay up to date with the latest insights and content coming from the MX Group, I hope you'll follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you.